Good evening, and welcome to the City of Topeka Planning Commission meeting. We are a commission appointed by the mayor and city council to plan for the orderly growth and development of our community, to hold public hearings, to make recommendations to the city council on planning items. Please note, city council rules state that the public hearings for planning cases shall be conducted solely by the planning commission. No additional public hearings will be conducted by the city council. Tonight's cases are tentatively scheduled to be heard by the City Council next month. Agendas can be found at topeka.org. For cases that require public hearings, the procedure will be as follows. First, the Planning Division staff will summarize the case. Next, we will hear from the applicant or their representative. Then we will receive public testimony. Public comments should be addressed solely to the chair and are limited to 4 minutes. Chris, would you please take the roll?
Mr. Dean?
Here.
Mr. Freed?
Here.
Ms. Herron?
Here.
Mr. Kalp?
Here.
Mr. Nager?
Here.
Ms. Pearson?
Here.
Mr. Tababin?
Here.
Mr. Warner?
Here.
Mr. Preiser is absent, but we do have 8 for a quorum.
Thank you. Next, the approval of minutes from February 20, 2023.
I will make a motion to approve the minutes. Second.
Thank you. Chris, could you please take the roll?
Mr. Warner?
Aye.
Mr. Tababin?
Aye.
Ms. Pearson?
Aye.
Mr. Nager?
Abstain.
Mr. Kalp?
Aye.
Ms. Herron?
Aye.
Mr. Freed?
Yes.
And Mr. Dean.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0 with 1 abstaining.
Thank you. Declaration of conflict of interest or ex parte communications. I will start out. I'll be recusing myself of the first action item for Cedar Crest Properties. Are there any other additional?
Can you turn the volume up a little bit so we can hear? Is that possible?
I could talk closer. Are there any other declarations of conflict of interest? If okay. With that being the case, we'll move into action items number 1, and I will turn it over to Ms. Pearson.
This is a public hearing for Z23/04 by Cedar Crest Properties, LLC. Are we ready for the staff presentation?
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Wiley Sharp, and I'm the intern with the Planning Division. Tonight I'll be speaking with you about case number Z23/04 by Cedar Crest Properties. This is a proposal to rezone approximately 2.5 acres south of Southwest 6th Avenue and east of Southwest Governor View from O&I 1 to O&I 2. Staff recommends approval of this rezoning. The property under discussion is part of a vacant parcel and is adjacent to existing office and institutional uses. There is an orthodontics office to the northwest and the campus of Rasmussen College to the southwest. To the north beyond 6th Avenue is the Governor's Mansion. This property has been vacant since it was annexed in 1969. It began as R1, but was rezoned in 2007 to O&I 1. The proposed O&I 2 zoning will allow for larger building and greater height. Rezoning the property to O&I 2 is consistent with the Land Use and Growth Management Plan. This area is designated for office use on the future land use map. Again, staff recommends approval of this rezoning. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Yes, are there any questions for staff by the commissioners? Seeing none, is the applicant present? You may come forward.
Members of the commission, Travis Hazlett with Cook Flat and Strobel Engineers, here on behalf of Cedar Crest. Excuse me. Basically, we are seeking a rezone for this property to accommodate a larger structure, a bigger building, and slightly more parking. This property will serve as a business headquarters for the Jones Advisory Group, JAG, and their business operations from day to day. As Ian mentions, it sat vacant and it fits within the comprehensive development plan. So, does anybody have any other questions for us?
Right. Are there any questions for the applicant by the commissioners? Seeing none. Is there any, you're fine.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any public testimony regarding this case? Seeing none, I wish to, are there any questions for the public by the commissioners? I don't think Chairman closes the public hearing at this point in time. Is there any discussion by the commissioners? All right, well, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I would move that the Planning Commission recommend approval of the rezoning from O&I 1 to O&I 2 and adopt the planning staff's recommendations and findings.
Is there a second?
Demetrius Herron, I second.
All right. Chris, can you take the vote? Oh, discussion. Is there any discussion on this motion? No. All right, then. Chris, will you take the vote?
Mr. Dean abstains. Mr. Freed?
Aye.
Ms. Herron?
Aye.
Mr. Kalp?
Aye.
Mr. Nager?
Aye.
Ms. Pearson?
Aye.
Mr. Tababan?
Aye.
Mr. Warner?
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0 with one abstaining.
All right.
We get everybody to speak into the microphones a little bit better so we can hear. We can't hear nothing back. Really, truly.
Yes, well,
From us or what?
Can you hear me?
yeah.
Turn the volume up. One of the two. Maybe into your mic. Yeah, speak into the mic.
Oh, I think we're trying to, sir.
That's much better. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, public hearing of Z23-06 by Cornerstone of Topeka, Inc. Staff report.
Yeah. Good evening. So this is a proposal by Cornerstone of Topeka Inc. Rezoning from R1 Single Family Dwelling District and M2 Multiple Family Dwelling District to M1 Two Family Dwelling District. Let's get into the location here. It's approximately 0.8 acres on the 500 block of Southeast Alkire Street, a little bit north of 6th Avenue in East Topeka. That is a picture of the lots, the top right picture there. The lots have remained undeveloped and vacant for its history. To get into the zoning here, zoning to the south is the M2 Multiple Family Dwelling District, which contains existing fourplexes that are already owned by Cornerstone Inc. Surrounding land to the northwest and east is R1 single family. There are some developed single family lots in this neighborhood. However, it's interspersed with vacant lots as well. Along 6th Avenue, you have the X1 mixed-use zoning district. Properties along 6th Avenue include a single-family residence, service garage, and a church. That's I-1 zoning lot there that you see is vacant as well. It's owned by the church, but there's no industrial uses on that not I-1 industrial lot there. So for the future land use for this neighborhood, it's taken from the East Topeka North neighborhood plan. Subject property is situated between residential medium density and residential low density for the future land use. With residential medium density, that's projected to have 2 to 4 unit dwellings. It acts as a transition zoning between higher uses, in this case, higher uses to the south with the mixed use, and then the lower intensive uses further north with bigger single-family lots. Residential low density is the future land use for non-urbanized areas in this neighborhood. And that's typically also where you see these larger single-family lots. So the subject property is residing in the, the subject property resides, like I said before, they're vacant lots, undeveloped. The proposed zoning fits with the existing neighborhood and will act as that transition sort of zoning that we have from the higher intensive uses to the lower intensive uses. So it conforms to the future land use of the neighborhood. Again, this rezoning case is for duplexes that will in the future be provided by Cornerstone. And so with all these facts in mind, staff recommends approval of this rezoning. Take any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Sharp. Are there any questions for staff? If not, is there a hold on a second. If not, are there any, is there a representative of the applicant here to speak on the project? Please come forward.
Yeah, I'm Jerry Yoder. I'm with Cornerstone of Topeka. I'm the facilities manager. He pretty well outlined everything we're planning on building. 2 duplexes in the areas that is being proposed to rezone. I think you had mentioned that there's some fourplexes to the south. We do not own those fourplexes.
Oh, I apologize.
Yeah, that's okay. But so anyways, I don't have anything else to add from what he mentioned.
Are there any questions for the applicant? If none, thank you.
Okay.
Now we'll open it up to public testimony. This will be 4 minutes per person, and anyone's welcome to speak if you'd like to. Just come up to the podium.
Daryl Mooney. I'm a 40-year real estate agent, and I'm here representing Miss Julie Flora, who is at home with a broken hip, that does own the fourplexes just to the south of this property. And they are 55 and older units, and they are occupied by people that are disabled or retired. And she is totally against this project because of the future use of this proposed property is low density. So approving this for duplexes and the increased traffic, one of the questions I have, is there going to be an entrance off of Woodland? Because that road, there's no way it could handle any more traffic right now. And Alcar is about the same way. I don't see how we could increase the density in that area whatsoever without causing some problems with traffic. Her main concern, and she has a broken hip, that's why I'm here tonight. Her main concern is that it's just not going to be suitable to the people just to the south. There's 14 units, and she just texted me. The address is 528 Woodlawn. There are actually 14 units that are for disabled people or 55 and older. And there is an entrance off of Alkire, and there's also an entrance off of Woodland. So one of my questions is, is there going to be an entrance off of Woodland to this lots?
Yes. There's two duplexes, and so there'll be 3 driveways.
Okay.
Could you stand up and say that again, please?
I said there's we're planning on building 2 duplexes, so there'll be 3 driveways.
2 duplexes and 3 driveways.
And they all come off of Alkire. That's the only access we have.
Is there going to be access off of Woodland?
No, we don't even own.
Okay.
It's only Alkire back about 100. I think the deepest the lot is like 200 feet or so. There's another house behind ours.
Yes. I'm recommending that the commission either table a decision and go out and take a look at the roads. I just don't think they can handle any more traffic out there, and look at the area yourselves, and also asking for a decline of the approval because the units to the south are 55 and older people. We don't need any more people in that area. We don't need multiple families, multiple noise. I just think it's the city has already said it's a low density for future years use, and approving duplexes does not really fit with low density, in my opinion. That should be for residential use. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yes, Mr. Culp.
Maybe I didn't hear you correctly. Do you see any development potential for this 0.8 acre?
I think it should be. I think it should be residential. I mean, that's the area. If you look at the city.
When you say residential, you mean single-family residential?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, absolutely. I just don't think duplexes fit in there with what's going on right now. And this what we call T-Town is owned by Garden View. It has 14 units that are disabled people and elderly people. And if you guys go out and drive on those roads, it's scary now. There's ditches on each side. I mean, I don't see why you would put any more traffic on those roads at all. So just on behalf of my friend and my client, and also I'm here on behalf of R&R Investments, another client, 3346 Kirklawn, they're asking for a decline in the approval as well. Richard Harries is the owner of that. So we want a single-family residential.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anybody else in the audience who would like to speak on this matter? Okay, seeing none, we will close the public hearing and move to discussion by commissioners. Does anybody have anything they'd like to discuss on this?
Mr. Chairman, just a question of staff. Tell me, once again, the number of duplexes and other, there'd be structures in addition to 2 duplexes, is that correct?
I'm sorry, Commissioner?
Well, how many structures are proposed to go onto the acreage?
One duplex, well, it'll be phased with the first, one duplex being constructed and the next duplex being constructed after that. So I believe it's like two duplexes total.
Okay.
I have a,
Go ahead.
are these 1 or 2 bedrooms?
One is a 2-bedroom, one is a 3-bedroom.
You need to come up to the microphone, sir.
So, like he said, right now we have money to build 1 duplex. So the back unit is a 2-bedroom, the front unit is a 3-bedroom. And there would be parking on either side. That's why there's 3 driveways. The center one will actually serve one side of each duplex, and then the outside would serve the others. So, but they would be exactly the same floor plan.
Thank you.
I had a question for staff. just to confirm, so one of these lots is already zoned M2 multifamily, is that correct? Or part of one of the lots?
Yes, one of the lots is already zoned M2. However, the lot width of being only 50 foot just kind of limits what Cornerstone wants to develop as a duplex.
Yeah, I saw their site plan and you can see that, but I just wanted to confirm that 25% of this is already zoned correctly. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, again for staff, William, the issue of the traffic impact of the new development, the city traffic engineer has reviewed, staff report sets that out, that the traffic engineer reviewed the proposal and saw no issues.
It is on a local street, classified as a local street, and it is unimproved, as in there are 2 ditches on both sides of the road. So yeah, the city standards would just apply when the building permit gets submitted, Commissioner.
And this is such a small project, it doesn't trigger any traffic impact study.
No, I don't. Mike.
Commissioner, I'm going to try to answer that question. So we had a pre-application meeting on this project, I believe, right? Traffic engineer participated in that pre-application meeting?
I believe so.
At that time, the traffic engineer will determine whether or not a traffic study is required. That was not required. Also, when we received the application, that's circulated to the traffic engineer. Traffic engineer did not identify any concerns about the condition of the roadway at that time.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Any other comments, or I'd welcome a motion?
I will make a motion that based on the above findings and analysis, I move to recommend the governing body approval of the request for rezoning from R1 and M2 multiple family dwelling district to M1 2 family dwelling district.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussions on the motion? If not, Chris, would you please take the roll?
Mr. Dean,
Aye.
Mr. Freed,
Aye.
Ms. Herron,
Aye.
Mr. Kelp,
Aye.
Mr. Nager,
Aye.
Ms. Pearson,
Aye.
Mr. Tabavin,
Aye.
and Mr. Warner.
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Thank you. Now for action item number 3, public hearing of Z23-07 by Ross Jessen S. Staff presentation.
Yes, Commissioners, this is an application for a rezoning of 3 acres from R1 and RR1 to I1 light industrial. This is located at the southeast corner of Southeast Cypress and Croco Road. Part of the property that's being rezoned, or is being requested to be rezoned, is zoned R1, as I mentioned. And that's on it'd be the west side of 21st Street. And the east side of 21st Street is currently zoned RR1. That part of the property that's zoned RR1 is currently not inside city limits. Concurrent with this rezoning application, there is an action to annex the property, and the rezoning and the annexation will be considered at the same time by the governing body. The rezoning is being requested to allow the current business owner to expand their business at that location on the east side of 21st, the west side of 21st. That's a landscaping contractor business. Staff is recommending approval of this rezoning request. Existing conditions. Subject property is adjacent to existing light industrial zoning and land uses to the south, west, and north. There's an existing building housing a kind of a heavy commercial light industrial use on the west side. There's other development planned for the west side of the property, and then to the north, on the other side of the cypress, there is a self-storage facility. Future land use map. The rezoning is consistent with the industrial designation on the future land use map, which is part of the land use and growth management plan. So the proposed rezoning is consistent with the future land use map. This is also an appropriate location for industrial zoning. It's close to truck access. It's not anywhere close to residential use. It's just, it kind of makes sense there. The land that's zoned R1, that's a rural residential zoning district, allows for low density residential and agriculture uses. The land's not really suitable for either of those things. And that concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to take any questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Are there any questions? Staff, yes?
That annexation that would go with this, that's not part of tonight's discussion?
Commissioner, correct. Because of the size of the annexation, it does not go before the Planning Commission. Annexations over a certain size, I think it's 10 acres.
10 acres.
Do go to the Planning Commission to determine consistency with the land use and growth management plan.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you have a?
Mike, the parcel that's up to the east, does it come right up to the right-of-way on Croco and also to the north on Cypress? There's no scraps of land being cut off, are there?
There are no scraps of land being cut off. So this was right-of-way that was owned and managed by the Turnpike Authority, and then the property owner acquired this excess right-of-way.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? If not, is there anybody representing the applicant here to talk about it?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, Travis Hazelip, Cook, Light, and Strobel. Basically, Mr. Hall outlined everything that we have going on over there. This is just basic business expansion for the area. Like Mike mentioned, it's a perfect use for the property. And if anybody has any questions.
Are there any questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody in the audience who would like to speak on this matter? And again, you have 4 minutes.
Just a very quick statement. I am his neighbor, and we do support what he's doing. We do support the area being turned into industrial. That's what it should have been a long, long time ago. And I think that's all. We do support him, and hope to be seeing you folks in the near future for a number of changes for downtown. Thank you.
Frank, can you give your name?
Frank Mead, by the way. Did I get that in?
Frank Mead.
Yeah, that's me.
Right. Thank you. Are there any other comments from the public? If not, we'll close the public hearing and to discussion by commissioners. Anybody want to discuss anything on this matter? And if not, it'd be open to motions.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
based on the findings and analysis in the staff report, I move to recommend to the governing body approval of the reclassification of the property from RR-1 Residential Reserve District and R1 Single Family Dwelling District to I1 Light Industrial District.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, Chris, would you please take the roll?
Mr. Warner,
Aye.
Mr. Jabobbin,
Aye.
Ms. Pearson,
Aye.
Mr. Nager,
Aye.
Mr. Kalp,
Aye.
Ms. Herron,
Aye.
Mr. Freed,
Aye.
and Mr. Dean.
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Next action item is number 4, public hearing of Z 23-05 by Meyer, Peter Paul, and Helen M. Trust.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'll be making this presentation tonight. This is an application to change the zoning of this 30-acre land. There are actually 2 parcels. 30 acres from R1 Single Family Residential District to I1 Light Industrial District. There are no immediate plans for development currently, but the applicant desires that the zoning be in place to allow commercial development in the future, consistent with the land uses around the property. Staff is recommending approval of this rezoning request. The property is adjacent to 2 single-family homes and several high-intensity commercial and low-intensity industrial uses. This current zoning has been in place since the land was annexed, apparently. The land was annexed in 1969 and has been undeveloped since that time, been used for agricultural purposes. The character of the frontage road is predominantly commercial. There's a tractor-trailer sales business to the west. There are other uses that are similar to that. I think there's a roofing supply place adjacent and to the east. There's a mobile home park a little further to the east. And within the past 2 or 3 years, we have responded to 2 or 3 rezoning applications in this area to R1 residential. Rezonings to I1 industrial. The proposed zoning is supported by the commercial designation in the land use and growth management plan, specifically as designated on the future land use map. I'm going to try to read that. I can hardly see it, but lower intensity industrial zoning may be appropriate within, I'll read it from there. That's much better. Lower intensity industrial zoning may be appropriate within community commercial areas whose character reflects a heavy commercial industrial mixed land use arrangement. The proposed zoning is consistent with the predominant existing land uses and zoning designations along the frontage road. There are those 2 single-family residential uses that you need to be aware of course, but really the direction that this is going in is industrial. This is not really a very good location for future residential development. That concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to take any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Any questions for staff? If not, are there any applicant representatives?
Good evening, Mr. Chair, Kevin Holland, Cook Flat and Strobel Engineers, and as Mr. Hall eloquently stated, it is purely speculative at this point. The owners of the property of this area are getting to the age where they want to look at not necessarily turning it into a bunch of children having to deal with a bunch of property in 10 years. So the market's out there potentially, very good intersection, especially for truck traffic and this and that. So looks very nice for an industrial outlook. They don't have anything imminent, but with the utilities and everything set forth, it looks very promising in this area. Here for any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Holland. Any questions for the applicant? All right, thank you. We'll move on to public testimony. Is there anybody who'd like to speak on this matter?
Hi, I'm Jackie Carker, and I own 5 acres just adjacent to this, and I'm not opposed to it being rezoned at all. what I'm concerned about is my property tends to flood, and that whole area at Lyman and Vale floods, and down Lyman Road. And I'm just worried that whatever is developed will cause my property to flood more often. But so I just want everybody to be aware that, I'm concerned about that. But I'm not opposed to it being rezoned. But
Okay.
if it causes me a problem, you'll probably see me again. Okay?
Thank you. Are there anybody else who would like to speak on this matter? Just a question to the staff. If something was developed here, it would be required to be designed in a way that would not flood the neighboring properties. Is that correct?
Yeah, so with development, even if a permitted use, they would go through a site planning process. With that site planning process, and probably a subdivision plat too, by the way. Part of that is the applicant or the developer submitting a stormwater drainage report, stormwater management plan, and they have to very much restrict the amount of runoff that leaves the site. The area is pretty flat, that part of North Topeka, which can be a problem. But the land tends to be, or the soil tends to be sandier, which is helpful. But yeah, that is something that's very carefully looked at. I think it would be helpful to know which parcel you own, and then we'll just, yeah, that'd be great.
This little 5 acres right here.
Okay.
And what happens is this area right here floods all down here and my property and down Lyman Road. That's the whole, it's a problem area.
Okay.
So we can't take on any more water.
Okay.
Otherwise, I'll be underwater.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
Thank you. We'll move, any other public comment? Not, we'll close the public testimony and discussion by commissioners. Any questions for staff?
I had a question for staff.
Yes.
Mr. Hall, can you show us where she pointed to, the property?
Somewhere there's I think so. Oh, of course. Doesn't work. Doesn't work. Oh, can you see that? Okay.
So
The big one or the little one?
Good try. Yeah. I'll do that.
You have to Vanna White it for us.
Her land is right there.
Yeah, that one right there.
Is that right?
Yeah, that right there.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Culp?
Mike, the residential properties that are on the north side, north and west corner of to the north and west of the subject property, there is because it's I-1 abuts residential, as the staff report notes, on the south side of the subject parcel, there's a 25-foot setback under the I-1 rules. But what about any setback for the residential properties?
The two to the northwest?
Yeah, right.
So the building setbacks match when you have I-1 I-1 abutting residentially zoned properties. The building setback that applies to the residential zoning applies to the I-1. So if it's a side setback, it'd be 5, and then it'd be 5 on the R1 side, 5 on the I-1 side, and then rear it's 25 and 25, like you said. Sometimes that can be a little ambiguous. One thing that we do require is when there's commercial or industrial development, like a parking lot or something, or a storage yard, they're required to screen that with fencing and or landscaping. And it goes through a process to review to provide for that screening. So it normally I-1 is not great next to residential, but there are those measures in place to to help mitigate the impact of it.
Okay, I appreciate it, Mike. Mr. Chairman, maybe put down a marker here at some point. If the regs only require you said 7 foot, 5 foot? I think the staff report says a 7 foot setback on there.
It's 7 feet.
7 feet.
It is 7 feet.
7 foot, yeah, which seems really modest or real minimal. That may be something that we ought to take a look at for a text amendment at some point. The 25 foot makes sense, and I don't understand why it falls all the way down to 7 foot under the regs. But
thank you.
And I believe we could add that to the motion. Is that?
Well, it complies with the regs.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
So this being just a regular rezoning, you can't place any conditions on the zoning.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're kind of limited there, but
In the future.
in the future, we'll give that some thought, and maybe there's something we can do about that. Because there's, in places like this, there does tend to be kind of that transition that's going on, residential to industrial.
The alternative to a greater setback would be buffering, some screening.
And there is some of that required, and one purpose of the site plan process is to make those adjustments when it's appropriate. If there's something that's like a typical I-1 land use is an outdoor storage yard, like a lay-down yard. And so we would require screening for that. That's already in the zoning code.
We just went through, in your absence, we went through a proposed I-1 rezoning off of Gage.
Yep.
And buffering and setback was a major issue.
Yes.
So if this were approved, they wouldn't be able to go out tomorrow and build a building 7 feet from the property line without going through the city again? Is that correct?
So when land is zoned I-1 and it has a side yard and it abuts a side yard of a residential district, so the building setback on that I-1 land is 7 feet, because it matches the required building setback on the residential side.
Okay.
If it's a rear lot line, it matches that rear setback, which is 25 feet. And then when you have a parking lot or a storage yard, like a lay-down yard, I believe it's 5 feet. And that means that there's going to be fencing and landscaping to provide some kind of screen.
Okay. Any other questions by the commission? And if not, we'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll recommend a motion. Based on the findings and analysis in the staff report, I move to recommend to the governing body approval of the reclassification of the property from R1 Single Family Dwelling District to I1 Light Industrial District.
Thank you.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Not. Chris, would you please take the roll?
Mr. Dean?
Aye.
Mr. Freed?
Aye.
Ms. Herron?
Aye.
Mr. Kelp?
Aye.
Mr. Nager?
Aye.
Ms. Pearson?
Aye.
Mr. Tababin?
Aye.
And Mr. Warner?
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Thank you. Now for item number 5, public hearing of PUD 23/02 by Eugene and Paramore LLC. Staff presentation first.
Good evening, Commissioners. I will be taking this one. So to start out on this property is currently unplatted. What we are looking at is 7.2 acres. This is 2 parcels, the ones that are highlighted there in red, minus the 60 feet to the east that are with this PUD. Currently, these parcels are unaddressed, and this PUD would allow for duplexes and quadplexes on a privately owned cul-de-sac at a length greater than 500 feet, and staff is recommending approval on this. So looking at the zoning in this area, this property is currently zoned R1. To the west is R1 as well that is undeveloped. To the north is R1 with single-family homes. To the east is R1 with single-family homes. And then south is R1. Once you get across Soldier Creek there, you have a PUD with some commercial uses as well. There's a little bit of R1 there, but there's more intensive commercial uses just a little bit farther south. And again, this is, as you see, there's a little bit of green there as well. That is RR1 that's north of Menninger Road. The rezoning to PUD with M2 multiple family dwelling district use group is what is being proposed in the PUD master plan. Looking at the future land use, proposed development of 2 family and multifamily uses. The Land Use and Growth Management Plan 2040 identifies this area for urban, suburban, low-density residential. So the Land Use and Growth Management Plan does specifically say that that is for single or 2 family development with a maximum of 6 dwelling units per acre. While this does not meet the single or 2 family development definition, the proposed development is at 4.2 units per acre. So it is still under that threshold for urban, suburban, low-density residential. This is looking east from Northwest Rochester Road onto the property. And here we have the PUD master plan. What I want to show here and things to point out. So the access is taken off of Northwest Rochester Road. And again, this is ending 60 feet. The east 60 feet are not included in this PUD master plan. You can see the 2-family residential, the duplexes there on the west side, and then it transitions into the quadplexes farther to the east. Some of the conditions on the PUD master plan, any increase in dwelling units will require a major amendment to the PUD master plan. There would be a minimum 4-foot fence along the property lines abutting residential uses to provide a visual screening. Additionally, there will be some landscaping that's required to include trees along the north and south perimeter to continue with that visual buffer. Buildings shall be in substantial conformance with the concept designs as provided, and we will show you what those designs are currently so you can get an idea of what we're looking at there. But specifically, those are going to include a single or 2-car garage for each dwelling unit, modulated facade with architectural details, and a gable roof. Additionally, a pedestrian and bicycle pathway at the east end to connect to the adjacent land and then eventually to Sprouton Lane. So there is one variance with this PUD master plan that is for the cul-de-sac having a length greater than 500 feet, and this is a variance to the subdivision regulations. Here are the designs. So this was the substantial conformance with these designs. What you have here are the 1-bedroom. I believe there are 1- and 2-bedroom units that are being proposed, but this shows the design of the 1-bedroom. So the gable roof, there's some modulation with the with this being kind of the duplex, and I believe those will be mirrored to continue this design, but the garages modulate, so one sticks out a little bit farther than the other. So those are the design standards we're looking for when we're going to have that conformance. Public concerns, you all should have been notified that we did receive, I believe it was 15 public comments, about 21 pages on the 14th via mail. We also received comments as well today. We've tried to take a look at what all of those comments were and put them into the staff report. This is not everything, but this is kind of the ones that showed up repeatedly. So multifamily residential development, rental housing in a single-family residential neighborhood. Again, as we showed on the zoning slide, there's single-family uses to the north of this property and just south. The effect that this development will have on property values. Increase in traffic on Rochester Road and local streets. When we had our pre-app meeting, the on-call traffic engineers did not say this would need a traffic study for this, the number of units that were being proposed. Emergency access. There were some concerns about the width that was required. We'll touch on that here shortly as well. Potential to increase risk of flooding. Developers' ability to complete the project. Extension of sewer and requiring existing residences to connect to sewer. And then the school district's capacity. So we will kind of touch on these concerns, or at least what we can. So this is a zoomed in image from that PUD master plan. That blue box you can see there is actually Sprouton Lane. So as you can see, this is a Sprouton Lane. Sproaton Lane. So here you can see Sproaton Lane. This is a cul-de-sac. It does not connect to that, so it will not have any direct traffic that goes to the local roads as well. So that access is off of Northwest Rochester. The fire department requires a 20-foot width that is 20-foot wide unobstructed driving lane for access. So the fire department has provided their comments on what's required for the emergency access as well. Floodplain concerns. Outlined in black here, we have the two parcels. And as you can see, there's a lot of different colors on this map. The blue with no hatching is the 100-year floodplain. So currently there is a levee that is in place that kind of follows along, and I will just show you. North Topeka Drainage District has a levee that follows along that area. So this property is not in the 100-year floodplain currently. That is all I have for my presentation. I would take any questions at this time. Yes.
How long is the private street?
I do not have that exact length.
It's greater than 500 feet, we know that.
Correct.
I'm just curious what the variance is. How far?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Kelp.
Thank you. Bryson, the issue of density, I want to make sure my math is correct because I know a lot of the public comment that's been made to this point touches on density. As is today with the R1 zoning, I could put as many as 45 single-family dwellings onto the property.
So with the density requirement for R1, that's going to be based upon the width. And I do not have the exact calculation for how many units could go in there, how that layout would look exactly. Give me 1 second on that one.
Well, the density is 6.7 dwelling units per acre for R1, according to the staff report.
You want me to try to answer that question?
Where is the 6.7 being referenced? I apologize.
Yeah, 6.7. I'm sorry.
6.7 is being referenced in the staff report?
Yeah.
Which page is that on?
That's on page 3.
Page 3.
Right towards the top.
So that is a max. So what you were reading is a maximum density of 15 units per acre for M2. R1 density is limited by a minimum lot size of 6,500 square feet, a net density of 6.7 units per acre, not accounting for streets. So that's taking the two parcels and then dividing that out by the minimum lot requirement. So that is correct.
Okay, so 40, 45, give or take.
Conceivably, it could be platted in a manner.
It's the maximum build-out.
Correct. It could
under
be
the existing zoning.
Correct.
And the applicant here is committed to 30 dwelling units on the same parcel.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, Mr. Nager.
There was some mention of some concern of like the traffic, particularly like within that existing single family neighborhood. But my understanding is that there's no entrance that will go onto Walnut to the north or Sproaton kind of towards the northeast. Is that right?
That is correct. The only access is going to be off of Rochester Road.
All right. Thank you.
I also have a question.
Yes.
So we have this plan here that shows the layout, the street and the layout. So is that locked in? That locks in the number of units that can be developed based on that design we're showing?
So the design is not 100% what is guaranteed to be there. But what we do have is that it'll be 2 and 4 units. This property still needs to be platted. But it is restricted by the PUD master plan to the 30 units. What exactly that configuration looks like when it comes to development, there is a little bit that will go into that, but there is still the site plan review process that would need to be done for this as well. But
All right, and as a follow-up, and Mary, you may need to be the answer. I don't see anything that talks about a limit of 30 units except under the performance objective. And I don't know if the performance objective is sufficient to have an enforceable condition. And so do we need, you have a statement under general notes that says that there cannot increase the number of units, but I didn't see a condition in general notes that talked about the maximum number of units is going to be 30. It's in the performance objective, but I don't think that's enforceable, or I don't think that's a condition that can be enforced. So if that's what we're intending, then I would, if that's correct, then we probably need to have something in the general notes, conditions added to that, put the 30-unit limit on there.
Mr. Chair, if I may weigh in,
Yes, Ms. Feeney.
I was looking at the motion, and it does say a residential development not to exceed 30 dwellings. Does that give you some comfort?
Well, but that's normally the kind of thing that we would put in the general notes of a PUD plan, right, if we wanted that kind of restriction?
So just to clarify, the 30-unit maximum is in the project data, and then general note number 8 does say that there cannot be an increase in the quantity of dwelling units. So you're saying those two together, separate, or?
Well, I get, where's it in the general data?
In the project data on the lower left-hand side,
okay.
It is the last bullet point there. It has the last bullet is 30 units maximum.
Okay.
And I don't know that this one will provide any greater clarity.
I got you. Okay. I missed that. Trying to read this kind of type is difficult to find everything.
I understand.
And is that under project data, Mary, then?
Yes.
On this, that is established as a maximum then? That's an enforceable condition?
Yes, it is.
Okay. That's all I need to know. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr.
I
Cobb.
want to follow up on the commissioner's note because I struggled. I used a magnifying glass. I tried to enlarge the master plan, on the computer and on paper, and it was very, very difficult. And I know it's a housekeeping matter, and I don't mean to take up a lot of the time, but in the future, we really need to have documents that are more legible. This is an important matter, and it was very difficult to read the notes.
Understandable.
And I'm sure that was true for the public, too.
Any other questions for staff? If not, we'll move on to the applicant presentation. Is there anybody here for the applicant? Mr. Holland?
Mr. Chair, Kevin Holland, Cook, Flatt, and Strobel Engineers, and I think I'm here for questions. I know Bryson kind of talked about everything, and the layout, 30 units, it's a fourplex maximum. So how it is, there's a lot of green space between them, so how we lay them out or put them next to the roadway. Cul-de-sac, closer to 700 to 740 as a depth. And that's to get around the corner and just to put the geometrics together to make that cul-de-sac work a little easier. And we took it into account not to tie into the neighboring road there to the northeast and try to keep it a cul-de-sac so that this one is put together on its own and does not impact the other neighborhood.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
And sorry, Mr. Chair, I do have the owner. He will be the owner and manager on site, Craig McCullough, as well as if you have any questions specifically to the owner.
Okay, thank you. Seeing none, thank you. Now we'll move on to public testimony. This would be 4 minutes per person, and we'll open it up. Please come to the podium if you'd like to speak on the matter.
Hi, good evening. My name's William Brandlin, and my wife and I, Celeste, own the property at 641 North Walnut Lane. And I'm here to express our total disapproval of this project. The basic plan here is to change the existing single-family dwelling units, which are R1, to multiple unit, multiple family M2 units, which basically will be single-story apartment buildings, because the developer has no intention of giving any of the residents ownership rights. That's the density for this project is basically, it's twice as dense as the surrounding area to the north. To the west, to the east, and to the north, they're all in the floodplain. To the south is Soldier Creek. If you look at this property, it's lower than any of the property around. It's in the floodplain, no matter what the maps say. All you have to do is go out and take a look at it. You should. Okay, the last flood occurred in 2006, and in our backyard and everybody on the south side of Walnut had water in their backyards nearly to their back doors. Okay. The architecture that they're talking about doesn't fit into the neighborhood at all. Our neighborhood is 70 years old, single-family dwellings, all one story. This is not, it doesn't fit into the neighborhood. And so what I'd leave you with is, if you were in our neighborhood and you lived there for 50 or 60 years like some of these people, how would you feel about this happening to you? And I think if you're honest about it, you wouldn't like it. Okay.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Gail Sloyer, and I live at 633 Northwest Walnut Lane. I'm on the south side with my husband, and we are not thrilled with this development, as you can expect. And just as Tony just mentioned, we don't want this in our backyard. But anyway, that's not what I'm here to talk about. I just wanted to address quickly the access road or roads to this development. And we've kind of gone around and around on this. At first, it was going to be the back side, which would be off of Sproaton and Walnut. But then it changed all of a sudden. I never really did hear why. But anyway, the main access has been mentioned tonight is off of Rochester. So it sounds like that's the only one that's planned at this time. So, and that's what's stated. I did read the planning staff report several times, and that's what's stated in your report, that the main access will be off of Rochester. And then I read the report again, and then I found a section where it said on page 6 on the staff report, and I'll quote, the proposed development does not provide vehicular access to the subdivision to the north, although it could be developed with that connection. Okay, I'm not too sure how to interpret that as far as, is it talking about with this plan, or is it talking about in the future, or whatever? The reason I'm concerned about that is obviously the back route it would bring, as was mentioned earlier, traffic through our little neighborhood, down our road, or Sproaton, and Rochester. Rochester has become very, very busy too. So that's a concern. And we do have some representatives here from Rochester. So, I'm sorry, Miniger, that's Sproaton. Okay. Our neighborhood streets aren't designed for heavy equipment, endless construction vehicles, or worker traffic. These are residential streets, obviously, and that's the way we'd like to keep it. In addition, after the development is complete and residents move in, I can see them using a back route, if it's developed, to get out of the housing development, because a lot of times what people do, if they want to go to Topeka Boulevard, they're going to use this back route. So We just wanted a clarification possibly on this, and I think partially it's already been addressed. But we'd like all access to be off of Rochester Road. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mae Brown, and I'm the property owner at 3019 Northwest Sproaton Lane. I'm here today to voice opposition to the rezoning requests put forth. Although I have many concerns, for the sake of time, I'm going to voice my biggest concern, which is pedestrian access. The staff report is recommending pedestrian and bicycle access between two private residential properties to connect to the end of Sproaton Lane. This currently ends and Sproaton Lane currently ends and requires a right-hand turn onto Walnut, and then it exits onto Rochester. They say that this would provide pedestrians and cyclists of this new development access to Sproaton Lane as an alternative to Rochester Road. As a resident of this neighborhood for over 7 years, I find this recommendation to be short-sighted and irrelevant to the actual issue, which is that there is no pedestrian access. Sproaton Lane only has two possible entrances and exits, which are either via Sanford and Walnut to Rochester Road, or you can go to Miniger Road, and guess where Miniger Road's going to get you? You can go a half mile to the west and exit out on Rochester, or a half mile to the east and exit out on Topeka Boulevard, both of which are busy intersections that can be challenging to navigate with a vehicle, let alone adding in pedestrians and cyclists. Furthermore, Sproaton, Sanford, and Walnut do not have any sidewalks, they do not have speed limit signs, they don't have any form of cautionary speed control, and are scarcely wide enough for two vehicles to pass in the opposite direction. That's on a good day when you don't have cars parked along the side of the street. As I continue to think through why the Planning Commission would recommend this, I can only come to one conclusion. It's easier to invade our neighborhood with unnecessary pedestrian traffic than to address the real issue. That would still exist, which is that there's no pedestrian access on either side of Rochester Road to the north of Walmart and Dillon's. Instead, you expose me and my neighbors to an increased risk of criminal theft and trespassing, put our safety at risk for driving and walking in our own neighborhood, as well as the safety of the residents that the proposed housing development would have if they chose to take that route to Rochester, Topeka Boulevard on foot or on bike. If this property is to be approved for rezoning, then it should be a requirement for the developer, the city, or both to upgrade the infrastructure that would expand pedestrian access north on Rochester. This should include widening Rochester Road as well as ADA-compliant sidewalks that would allow the senior residents of Mr. McCullough's proposed clientele to access Topeka businesses safely. Routing them south through a residential neighborhood only gives them access to our residential housing, not the businesses that they would need access to, which lie to the north. So I would ask that in consideration of whether this is approved or not, that you are considering that the plan as it's written out, if it makes sense. I know that Bryson said there's not a traffic study required on this, but I do think that's a mistake. For anybody who's been out on Rochester Road, turning out of Walmart, Dillon's, Harold's Tire, Miniger Road, it's very hectic at certain times of the day. And now you're talking about 30 more families, potentially 2 cars per family. That's 60 additional cars pulling in and out of Rochester in an already really congested area. That's it. Any questions?
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Kenneth Bailey, and I live at 649 Northwest Walnut Lane, which is the dead center of that block. And all of the houses on that side of the street all have their patios facing south, where most of us live in the summertime. And then you're obstructing our living arrangements with these new developments. Now, on the west end of this property, or east end of this property, there's a wooded area. And on the south, there's a wooded area, and an older farmhouse. On the west, you got your farm setting with a big red barn. And to the north is these Walnut Lane and all these other residential areas, single-family homes, 60 to 70 years old. And then they want to drop all of these duplexes and fourplexes right in the middle of all of that, which is no way going to match the houses that are already there. They're going to stick out like a sore thumb. And not only losing that view, that we're losing our view to the south, and we're losing wildlife too, because this place has got lots of wildlife running around in there now. And then we've got deer, turkeys, groundhog, geese, and ducks, and they'll all be gone. And that's just about all I got to say. I just ask you, please consider this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Kelp.
Sir?
Sir?
Sir? Ask a question of you, sir. I'm familiar with the property, and I'm sure you do have a great view. You and your neighbors have a great view off the back of your properties. I appreciate that. But, you don't own the property. Somebody else does. What kind of development would you not find objectionable?
I'd like to see no development there.
Well, buy the property,
I know that's not feasible,
and you can
but
accomplish that.
That's my opinion. I just assume that it stay like it is.
Well, I understand. And I'm sure there were deer and raccoon and so forth, in the area where your house is right now, at an earlier point in time.
Well, that's just the way I look at it.
I understand.
I'd like to stay that way.
I appreciate your comments, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Mary Bargman. I live on Menninger Road, so I don't have the same type of issues with this that some of my neighbors do, although I am in complete agreement with them. The traffic that we have now, and you say that there is not a study needed because of this, I would disagree wholeheartedly. First of all, when there is any type of pavement or anything that goes on any of these streets, Menninger Road becomes the detour. It is always the unmarked detour because it is the only road from Highway 24. It is the first road north that goes from Rochester to Topeka Boulevard. So we are the unmarked detour. No matter what you say about this, it will increase our traffic. It may not increase it the way it will increase their traffic on Sproaton, Wilder, Sanford, and those streets. And I really disagree with what you have proposed. After your first proposal stating that you were going to go from the north and then get onto Sproaton Lane, you've changed that so that Rochester will be the only entrance and exit. But putting the pedestrian area there is unfair to the neighbors who are living there, and that will take away their privacy. They will have access, 60 families that could possibly decide to walk their dog, do whatever they need to do, but that takes away from all of their privacy. The neighbors have already had a major concern about traffic anyway, because there is, as previously stated, there are no sidewalks. There's nothing except a ditch. When you're walking down Rochester Road, it's a ditch unless you get to the bridge, but that's it. So when you look at Wilder Road right now, where Celeste and Tony live, Walnut, sorry, that road is already breaking up at the corners because of the Autumn Home, the nursing homes that they have put in that area. So there is increased traffic, parking on the roads. It's unfeasible. And then when you have the fire truck, the ambulance that needs to come when there's a resident that has had a medical issue, they have a very difficult time coming down Rochester and getting onto that, or coming down Menninger, having to go to Sproaton. So I just think you need to take another look at it, deep dive into it, and like someone else has said, if this was your neighborhood, not that I am against new housing, but I think there are other areas in town that would be more feasible and more friendly, a friendlier area that would be able to be developed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Marilyn Downs, and my husband John and I have lived at 620 Northwest Walnut Lane since 1984, almost 40 years. We've enjoyed the neighborhood very, very much. It's a nice, quiet, people love an exercising street. We have more walkers and bicyclists and little kids learning to ride their tricycles and bicycles. But anyway, it's been a lovely street. And I wanted to tell everybody, on the morning of October, back in 5, I opened the front door, and we'd had a hard rain up north of us the night before. And I looked out, and good Lord, there were seagulls flying around and water out there. The Soldier Creek was up to the brim. The Kansas River wasn't even noticing it. Anyway, we got into the car, went down to the bridge, and this is kind of what we've seen. It was to the brim. This is looking north. This is at Soldier Creek on Rochester Road. This is where, right back here, is where they want to build this, down in here. It's low. This was to the top. I'm not very good at getting these apart. There's one looking straight out that way. This is looking on the west side. And later, they come through and they thought that this part was going to breach. It did not. We were lucky. But mid-morning, we did have firemen coming through the neighborhood that were wanting us to get the people on the south side, help them get their stuff in their basements or walkouts, and some campers moved. This did not happen. I'm concerned about these dwellings being down there because if up on 35th, they had a bad flood. And I've got pictures here if you want to see it of it being over and out up there and in homes. But the land is low. I guess I worked as an EMT and things like that for a number of years, and I am very distraught at putting older people in a situation of not having the ground elevated, and that's one thing I understood, that they weren't going to do that. They would, no basements, and anyway, I just think there might be safer places to do this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did anybody want to see more pictures?
I believe a lot of these were sent previously, and so commissioners, at the back of your packet, there should be, I believe there was one in there that I had not seen looking from the bridge, but we did include these in that information, ma'am.
Yeah, we do have them in our packets here.
Hi, I'm Dwight Holmes, 735 Northwest Walnut Lane. I live on the west end of Walnut between the three residential and nursing homes. The lands to the south of me want to develop. I can't get a clear picture on how long this development's going to take. You hear 2 to 3 years, which usually balloons into 4 or 5 or 6. There's going to be a lot of dust, a lot of noise that the neighbors have to put up with. And these nursing homes, they like to sit on their back patio and look out, so they'll probably be inside while they're staying away from dust, I suppose. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
We had one speaker who's sick, but you guys should have his email that came in today. Mike Breyer.
Okay.
Hi, my name's Jeff Stadler. I'm speaking on behalf of my father, Edward Stadler, who lived at 27 Rochester Road, which is the only property out of everybody that's south of this development and right next to the Soldier Creek. As his representative, I want to speak against this change, including for the following reasons. And one is the traffic on Rochester Road at his location close to Soldier Creek Bridge currently does make it difficult to enter Rochester Road from his property. The bridge does obscure the vision from people coming from the south there, and it's difficult to get out. And my father's also concerned with the runoff water from this project. Really haven't heard a whole lot about how they're going to be taking care of this, but he is very adamant that it not come across his property, because that's a shortcut to the Soldier Creek, and he does not want to come across his property. And we'd like to see some type of plan with ditches that would channel the water so it does not come to his property. And also, based on this PUD and the markings that they show on there that shows the North Topeka Drainage District, where their area of upkeep is, it appears to me that this PUD infringes on my dad's property, with at least 3 units on his property and 2 additional ones that are on or at the property line. I based this on historical maps of boundaries between the 2 properties, including from the Soldier Creek condemnation map from Record Book 1348, page 434, dated March 14th, 1958, and an undated Main Sanitary Sewer Concept Map. And I do have copies of both of those if anybody would like to. Actually, I have the original documents he had and some bad copies that I'd be glad to show anybody that wants to look at it. But based upon the markings on their plots, the property lines do not agree with historic maps and what they have. And so it's for these reasons, and plus as expressed by the other neighbors, we urge you to vote against this proposal. Thank you.
Sir, I had a question for you. Has your father's property ever flooded the house?
Since Soldier Creek's been in there? Because that house before they built Soldier Creek had been flooded, and that's when they built the new Soldier Creek. It went across the land that is, my dad was born in that house. His mom owned it, and it cut almost all the property they had away, and they had moved the house. And now, since then, he's had at least twice been told to flee to higher ground, including in 2005, in which he got all the help he could to raise up out of the basement, the stuff in the basement so it wouldn't get possibly flooded. And he even took trailers and stuff off to the north to higher ground.
Okay.
And one comment he made is that the water raises quick. I mean, you just have a matter of a few hours to go.
So since Soldier Creek was built or developed, there has not been any flooding on the property since then?
Nothing major, no. Yeah. I mean, there's corners of it, but nothing that's approached the house.
And these FEMA maps would reflect that. The blue areas are historical boundaries of the latest flood data that the government has.
I can tell you that in 2005, when that water was high, those dikes were making all kinds of scary noises that, I mean, it concerned me. I mean, because it was making they were making all kinds of groans and moans and stuff that didn't sound too promising at the time. And if it hadn't have been for the debris on the west side of Soldier Creek Bridge stopping the water flow, I believe it may have been even worse because the water backed up to the west instead, and it did breach up higher along Soldier Creek.
Okay, thank you for the information.
Okay.
Hi, Eugene Murphy, 535 Vinegar Road. I'm just opposed to the project because we don't need any more foot traffic, any more automotive traffic. If you try to get out on Vinegar Road at 7 o'clock in the morning, you might as well wait for a while. There's just no way to get in and out of there in a timely manner everywhere you go. And I don't talk very well in front of people, so I'm losing myself. But we just don't need the traffic around. And I'm concerned about it may be 1 and 2 family or 4 family, according to their stuff. But what stops them from making it all four homes on every one of them instead of 31 and 2 homes? I don't know what's in the paperwork to stop that from happening, but you could go up to 120 people instead of 60, like they're saying. You know, what's to stop you guys from building 4plexes instead of single housing or double housing?
So just to be clear, the PUD establishes 2 and 4 units as the allowed. So while this is a conceptual document, 2 and 4 is what has been discussed in this plan. So the cap on the number of dwelling units is 30.
Right, but that could be 30 4plexes or 30.
No, it is not. It is 30 total units. So on the PUD master plan, and I will reflect over here. So each one of these areas that's broken down represents one of the dwelling units. So there are 30 dwelling units shown here, and that cannot exceed the 30 that are shown.
Right, but that could be 30 4plexes.
No, there are. So currently what is being proposed and what is on this document shows 6 4plexes and 3 duplexes. So that is how they get to the 30 units. So that you could not have...
Is that in concrete?
Correct. Anything that would add additional units would require a major amendment, and that is essentially this process all goes through again. This is not something where they are allowed to just come in and do additional units. It is 30 units that it's capped at.
Okay. Right, but that still doesn't make me feel better that you say that, but you can change that later down the road. Also, the elderly housing, you have nothing in there that says it'll only be elderly people, period. The city guy here, Mike, said in the last meeting that the deal was for elderly, but we couldn't hold them to that because of discrimination laws.
Correct. There is nothing on the PUD master plan that has an age tied to the units.
So we don't have that, and we don't have whether it's a singleplex or a 4plex.
The PUD master plan allows for duplexes and quadplexes up to 30 units.
But it is 30 of anything.
30 total units.
Right.
So
Can I
A
try?
fourplex counts as 4 units. A duplex
Okay,
counts as
that's
2
my
units.
concern. Okay, that was my concern, is they could change them to fourplexes on every one of the 30 units. Okay,
That's my apology for not being
Okay.
more clear on that.
that's okay. But that's all I have to say.
And I just want to comment, sir, before you take a seat, that we cannot govern who stays in those properties because it would be a fair housing violation.
Right, and
It's
that's-
up to the owner to decide how they're going to utilize and who they're going to rent to.
And that's one of the biggest reasons I'm here.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Sir, you mentioned the traffic load on Rochester, and other people have mentioned that too. You live north of the subject property, right?
Correct.
What is
Correct.
your expectation of if this is approved, what percentage of the traffic, of the additional traffic load would go north versus south into town?
Well, it depends on where they want to go. If they
Well,
want to
okay,
go,
if the majority of people in these units work in town, work in Topeka, would you expect them to travel south on Rochester on into the city of Topeka?
what if there's a wreck on Rochester Road and they have to come around Topeka Boulevard and down Miniger Road? It could be every one of them.
Well, it's a free
10%.
country, so I suppose
Right.
folks could do that, but wouldn't most of the traffic going north be to go to Seaman High School, Seaman schools?
Yes,
Okay.
but you never know. You wouldn't believe the traffic we got just from the apartments up on Topeka Boulevard that were just built. The trash, the foot traffic, it's ridiculous. And they shouldn't be coming that way either, but they do.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a question? When you say units, like a 4-unit place, that's 4 families, 4 households, right?
Correct. So
Wait.
So you have only 30 houses, or 30 units, that's it?
30
Correct.
families.
No matter how big it is, it's just 30.
correct. Correct. So, can I say that? So it would be the equivalent, and this is not, just to use a comparison, it would be the equivalent of 30 single family. That would be the same number of units that are being added.
I guess my question is, why are you so forward?
Yep. Sir,
No one else.
can you come up to the microphone, please?
There you go, where's it? My name's Terry Wang. I live on Meniger Road. I'm not picking on you, but you're really pumping this. There's got to be a reason. I'm just asking. I'm not looking for an argument or fight with you. You're pumping it more than anybody else here is pumping this thing.
I am the staff planner, so
Okay. I didn't know that. Okay.
so I work for the city of Topeka.
Okay.
My job was to take the information that has been proposed as far
Okay.
as their application
Okay.
and produce the staff report.
Okay.
So I am the one who is presenting
Okay.
what I've done.
I didn't realize it. Sorry.
Not a problem.
You, sir. You asked the gentleman earlier what he expected when he lived on Walnut, the backyard. If you lived on Walnut, what would you want to look at in your backyard?
Well, I think, sir, not to be
I
flip,
mean, I'm just
but
asking.
if it was important enough to me to have the scenic view
Okay.
over somebody else's property, I would probably try to get ownership of that property.
Right,
And if I
which,
can't do that, then I'd
as
have to
you've
accept
seen-
that somebody can exercise their property rights.
I understand
And develop the property consistent with the rules and regulations of the
But
city
no
of
one has
Topeka.
the money in our neighborhood that I know of that could afford to have how many acres there is that there now.
I'm sorry, sir, was that a question?
No, no one that I know of in this outfit has enough money to buy that property and just do nothing with it. I mean, that would be stupid, really. I mean, unless you want to put a pool in it, big pool, but.
But I understand the,
No, I know, but
the value you place upon a
Right.
view, a pastoral
Right.
view.
Okay.
You got some woodland, you got wildlife, all that,
Yeah,
that's great.
I got that. That's why you live out north, south, east, west in the country, somewhat in the country. We're not in the country, but we're pretty close.
Right, but you're enjoying somebody else's.
Right.
Assets.
I got that. You're right. Next thing, the sewer system. Is that going to have an actual sewer system or septic like we all do?
So this will require a sewer extension because it is a part of a major plat. That is one of the requirements for a major plat.
Okay, so where is the sewer plant in North Topeka? I mean, you know what I'm saying? I mean, we're all on septic, so where is the main sewer plant to where this water would go to a sewer plant?
So just to be fully transparent
Okay.
here, we are at the zoning stage of this. I'm not sure how far along the extension process is for all of that
So you
information.
got
I
to
do
build a
not
sewer
know.
system, I mean, a plant for the sewer to go to?
That is not something that is in my realm of understanding. I don't have an answer to
Okay,
that.
seems to me you would build this plant before you built these houses and bring sewer to it.
Well, typically, it's not a plant, it's just a
It's,
pipe.
okay, it's
You're gonna
it's
build the
not a
sewer
plant, you're
first.
right. I've been around it, but you have to have something to put the waste in, and then waste
Correct.
takes it somewhere else.
Right.
We don't have that in North Topeka, at least where I live. So where's that gonna be built at? Anybody know?
So maybe I can help here a little bit.
Okay. I'm just asking questions because we're
right.
really confused about
So
this.
there's a sewer plant in Oakland.
Okay, Oakland, you're right.
And there's what this property needs is an extension of a sewer main
Okay.
to get to this property. So there's already a main going that direction towards
Okay.
the.
I
So this
didn't
is
realize
extending
that.
the main, and it'll go
Okay.
as it's going currently.
So are we gonna have to pay for it, or is the city gonna pay? Who's gonna pay for this?
The developer's paying for.
The whole thing?
Maybe he can answer that question.
Mr. Holland?
Sorry, I'm just asking a question.
Thank you. Kevin Holland again, Cook, Flat, and Strobel. And yes, we do have a layout coming basically from the east and tying into at the east. So it's coming through the development and tying into this full property.
Okay, I just.
And then if we could clarify that there's a lot of discussion about sidewalk tying back to the northeast northeast roadway or the north neighborhood, and that wasn't something necessarily brought on by the owner. We're completely fine having a loop of sidewalk within our own development, not tying that to the other
Right.
neighborhood if that's an issue. But
To me, it's not, because there's nowhere to put sidewalks in our neighborhood, really, or
at
even
this
on
point,
Rochester.
though,
I mean,
at this point, though, but in
Right.
10 years, Rochester will be fully developed, and think of what Wanamaker looked like 15 years ago compared to what it does now.
And we don't want that.
But it's
So-
coming. Dillon's and Walmart are right there.
I know, but
Can you answer the question? The people on septic that have to convert to city sewer?
They do. There is actually, and Mike can probably say this. They do not have to, and I don't want to speak for Mike. Probably can say this. So septic will be brought in. That'll basically go down the center line of this roadway. But you're still on septic, and it would still be economically unfeasible to connect the properties to the north
right.
to this
I mean,
feed.
good Lord, you'd have to tear streets up and yards up to put sewer in. So we don't have to get on we don't have to get on the sewer system.
Mr. Chairman.
I mean, you can't force
Mr.
us
Hall.
to be on a sewer system. There's no way.
Let me respond to that,
Mr.
Mr.
Hall.
Chairman. So that was one of the comments that came up in the written comments we received from the neighboring property owners. So the properties on Walnut and those areas to the north are on septic
Right.
systems. They're on, I think those are about half-acre lots.
Right.
Today we wouldn't allow a half-acre lot on a septic system, but they're grandfathered
Grandfathered
essentially,
in, like anything
right?
else is.
So with this development, a sewer main will be brought in from the from the east. It'll roughly go down the center of that street that's shown on the
street that you're building, or the
street that they're proposing to
building.
build.
Okay.
The city's not building it, the developer is.
Got it.
Okay? The developer will extend the sewer main at their expense. And there are conditions under which adjacent property owners might be required to connect to that sewer, but it has to be adjacent. So
people on Walnut may have to actually be on that system?
no.
Okay.
Only if the sewer main went to the north
Okay.
would they have to be.
Okay.
And there's an ordinance, and I can give you a copy of it if you'd
Yeah, okay.
like.
Yeah.
I made a copy. I hate to read the whole thing. I don't
Yeah,
think I better
okay.
do that. But basically, if a sewer main extends to the north and it's adjacent to properties on Walnut,
Okay.
first of all, it probably wouldn't be adjacent to all the properties on
No,
Walnut.
I wouldn't think so.
It'd just be to those on the end.
Okay.
And an adjacent property owner would have to connect if their system fails, if their septic system fails
Okay.
potentially.
Okay.
Or if the property changes hands. But again, this sewer main is not going north on Rochester. It's just extending down the center
Okay.
of this property.
Okay.
So it's very unlikely, based on these conditions,
Right.
these are right in the city ordinance, that anybody that's on septic out there right now would have to connect.
Okay.
If you're adjacent to one of the properties there, adjacent can be interpreted in different ways.
Right.
But anyway, sir, I'll give you this
So
copy of this.
if we have to be, we're way on Meningers, we're away from that. But so if you're on Walnut and have to be connected, who's going to pay for that? The owner of the land? These guys are going to pay from my house to the sewer system, to the new sewer system? I mean, just saying, I don't know. Someone's got to pay for this.
Mr. Chairman, if I'll respond, if you are required by ordinance to connect to the sewer, the owner is required to pay for the connection.
But let's be clear, there's no one other than the people in the proposed subdivision that will be required to be
Right,
hooked up
right.
to the sewer.
I've got
So
that.
I don't understand why we're having any further conversation.
I'm just
at this
asking.
point.
Because, rumors have spread, blah, 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 you have to do this, this, and that, and that's how rumors spread, so.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm Don Sloyer. I live at 633 Northwest Walnut Lane. And to support Mr. Bailey back here, what would he like out there in that field? Or whoever asked, we would like to have a crop. Mr. Ireland used to farm that property out there, and there was a crop out there. Okay. I'm Don Sloyer. I'm 75 years old, a lifelong resident of Topeka. I've lived at 633 Northwest Walnut for 40 years. I am the one that brought this whole blankety-blank thing to light, blankety-blank, and got these people riled up by circulating our information that we had. We saw surveyors on the property surveying on Sproaton, and we saw trucks in the field. So I talked to our councilwoman, Christina Valdivia Alcala, to let her know my concerns in December of 2022, and told her of what we saw out there. She told us, encouraged myself and my wife to get all this information out to our neighbors as quickly as we could, and we did, and the neighborhood was not receptive to it at all. The housing will be slammed up against single residences, single-family housing, which takes away from our property tax. For those who live on the south side of Walnut Lane, the plans show the housing will literally be in our backyard. Also, traffic on Rochester can be heavy at times, despite what you might think. Rochester and Menninger are disasters when it comes to traffic. And this whole thing with this project will be just perpetuating the traffic problems. At the Zoom meeting we had, Mr. McCullough promised to be fully responsible for the upkeep of the land under construction and upon completion. This field has not been farmed since Mr. Ireland farmed it back in the 2000s. And I really have my doubt that Mr. McCullough has even done a thing to this field, because we've had to call the city at least 3 years to come out and cut all the weeds down. We were not impressed with the Zoom meeting at all. This piece of property they wanted me to talk about, adjacent to Soldier Creek Levee, during the high water of 2005, it almost breached the levee, and we were advised to move everything to the south. most of the neighbors had to do this. Finally, this is just another example of how the permanent residents on our street are being treated with different types of housing. Case in point, we have had 3 family houses turned into businesses as nursing facilities. Now the proposal is for another business to take over this land down here, once again benefiting the city, who is responsible for the growth, for fulfilling the growing needs in Topeka. We just don't think this type of project would be allowed in southern Topeka or west Topeka. Why is it being dropped in this plot of land?
That's the time. Time's up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Culp.
Sir, you indicated, you stated you were involved in the origins of this, of getting people advised, people in the neighborhood advised about the project. Is that right? Can you tell me, can you shed some light on how the misinformation about the floodplain issue, how that came about?
What about the floodplain?
Well, the concern that folks had that this subject property, it does lie within the floodplain, which it does not. Do you know how that came about?
Because in 2005, 2006, the high waters, the pictures that Mrs. Downs had, the water ran across Goodyear's parking lot, and they had to clear out the...
No, I know, and people have spoken to that tonight, and I remember that quite well.
They had to,
but the issue was whether or not the property is within the floodplain or not, which it is not. But I think folks even tonight believe that it is within the floodplain.
Yes, and the maps that we received really didn't provide anything to us.
Do you believe the property is within the floodplain?
Yes.
You do? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public that'd like to speak tonight?
Can I go twice?
Sure, it's fine.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
To answer your question about the floodplain, it is in the 100-year floodplain. And if you're familiar what the 100-year floodplain is, it doesn't mean one flood every 100 years. It means that every 100 years they could have multiple floods. And it isn't within that floodplain. And in 2005, 2006, we had water. That whole property was covered with water, and it came up literally to the back doors of the houses on the south side of Walnut. And that's why we think there's a floodplain. And I'd just like to add one thing about the traffic. One way in and one way out on Rochester. That's great, but you say that Rochester is going to become the next Wanamaker. Who's going to pay for the bridge to widen it going north to south on Rochester that goes over Soldier Creek? It's one lane each way, so you can't widen Rochester unless you're going to pay millions for a bridge. Right. Okay. All right. There's no room for sidewalks on Rochester. If this is allegedly for senior housing, how are the people going to get up and down the street on Rochester? There's no room for a sidewalk. There's a culvert there. I mean, I wonder if anybody's even driven by to look at it.
I saw it tomorrow morning, go down Rochester,
Yeah.
see what it's like.
Yeah.
I actually live north of you, so I drive it every day for 40 years.
Okay, but then you're familiar with it.
I'm familiar with the neighborhood too.
Right. Yeah. The east side of Rochester is a field, and on the is the property. On the west side is a field, and each one has a culvert. Okay, you can't build sidewalks there. You can't widen Rochester.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Cobb.
Sir, could I ask you the same question I've asked a couple other folks tonight, and that is, what development would you see happening there that you would not object to?
Well, I'd like to see R1 if that's the best we can do.
I'm sorry, what?
R1, like it is, leave it unchanged.
Okay, you may have heard at the very beginning of this session tonight, I asked staff about the density of single-family dwellings that could go in, and it's more dwelling units in the R1 than under this proposal with the duplexes and fourplexes. I could put more people, more rooftops under that property in the R1 than the applicant is proposing in this project.
Well, I don't think you could, because in the event that you put more units in there, you wouldn't have room for roads.
Well, I guess we'll have to agree to disagree on that.
Okay, we can do that, but there wouldn't be enough room for more units than roads. And right now, north of the proposed area, they're half-acre lots on Walnut.
And that's not a requirement in the R1.
Huh? Well, that's what it is, though. That's what I'm saying. That's what it is.
It's not a minimum of half acre.
Okay, but what they're talking about with this development is they're basically talking about 4 units to every acre. So on the average, every unit gets a quarter of an acre. Well, that hardly fits in with the neighborhood. The architecture hardly fits in. I have 7 seconds left. Does anybody have any questions? All right, well, on behalf of everybody, I'd like to thank you all for listening, because I know you hear this every month, but it is important to us, and we'd appreciate your taking a closer look at this. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
I got still some time left earlier anyway. I was asked about whether my dad's property was flooded, and I'm thinking where his house is. But his property goes back just as far as this other property, or I'm not sure, maybe even further. But about halfway in, there is a low area that was flooded. It just didn't come up to the housing part or even the back field there, but there was a low area that was like a river that was going through it. So I just wanted to clarify that there was actually water standing in there. Just that I was mistaken that on my response, because it wasn't at the house area. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very briefly.
Yes.
Do you know whenever that was?
That was 2005.
All right. Thank you.
And again, that's the second time he was told to bail out of his house. I can't remember the first time.
Probably 93.
Before that. 92 or 3?
93, probably.
Yeah, that sounds right. 93 actually sounds good. Sounds correct.
Thank you. Would you like to speak? Yes.
Mr. Chair, Commission, everyone in attendance. Want to start off, my name is Craig McCullough. I'm also a lifelong North Topecan. My company, Eugene and Paramore, is named after the intersection I grew up on. I live maybe not quite a mile to the west of the subject property on Dottie Street. I got kids that go to Seaman schools, so I have a vested interest in North Topeka as well. I'd also, secondly, like to start by saying I apologize for all the angst I've caused everyone here tonight. It wasn't my intent. My intent is to build a nice, safe, beautiful community in North Topeka for 55 and over housing. It's not to invite trouble or ruin your view, but to provide good housing in North Topeka, something that, in North Topeka, there's kind of this gap between, less expensive homes and then really expensive homes. The stuff getting built right now is in the 350 to 450 range, and that's really expensive. I'd like to see some more affordable housing, not necessarily low-income housing, but just more affordable housing. And I thought that this would be a good way to achieve that objective. I want to address a few comments that was made to tonight. I believe May Brown, you mentioned pedestrian access on Walnut and Sprotten. I didn't ask for that. I don't necessarily want that. I wanted my community to be kind of self-contained and away from your community just as much as you want mine away from yours. So I don't know where that got brought up, and I'll make sure it's gone because, frankly, my community will have a walking trail on the land that I own. Second thing, the traffic. We talked about the traffic study. There was no traffic study needed. We're all in agreement that Rochester is broke. It needs to be fixed. I just don't think that I should be the one to have to pay for it. I think we're all in agreement that Rochester needs some work, but I don't think it should be one person's responsibility to widen that road or to put sidewalks on Rochester Road, especially if there's sidewalks that lead to nowhere. So there were some comments about my plans not fitting. My plans are essentially ranch-style plans with a 2-car garage, and a duplex is a similar footprint to almost every home in your neighborhood. I am going to go out on a limb and say you guys' homes are probably around 1,300 to 1,500 square feet on the main level. Each one of my units has approximately 900 square foot for a 2-bedroom unit. So that would put it in the same realm as all of your units. So they would match in much better than the new duplexes there by the old Falleys. So a couple times tonight, access from the north was mentioned. I have never asked for traffic access or vehicle access from the north. I wanted a cul-de-sac from the beginning. I'm not sure who told you that. It wasn't my idea. Frankly, I can't afford it. I don't need it. And like I said, I want a self-contained community. It was also stated tonight that there was no plan for individual ownership. That is incorrect. My plan for this community was to own and operate it as senior living rental homes until such time as I can establish a common interest community or a homeowners association and parcel out each individual unit to sell them individually. That is not in this plan because it didn't need to be part of this plan. I am just trying to get it rezoned as the first step. The sewer main, I have already talked to my neighbor to the east. It is Greg DeBacker. We talked and discussed the sewer main going through his property onto my property, and no one else would be affected. If you wanted to join and hook up to sewer, give me a call. I'm sure we can work something out. Next, we had comments about my, property there and it ruining the view. And for that, I do apologize. If anybody really does want to keep that view, I am open to selling the property. In fact, I never intentionally went out to buy this property. I approached the former landowner about putting a sewer line through to my land directly to the west of Rochester. And he said that, hey, he can go ahead and sell me the land. I said, great, I'll start over there, and I can build over there. I cannot, just like you guys probably can't buy land to do nothing with it. So if I don't, or if I'm unable to develop this type of community, I will have to do something with it. And most likely I'll sell it or have to develop individual single-family residences, which there would be more. So I could sell it to another developer. The developers that are currently active in North Topeka aren't exactly making the quality of homes that I prefer. However, there are some good builders. Who knows who will get it? And lastly, I take pride in all of my properties. Every property that I've owned in Topeka, I've left better than when I found it. In fact, the last property that I sold in Topeka, I sold it at a property value increase of over $500,000 because of the work I put into things. I like things to be nice. I grew up in Eugene and Paramore is not exactly the nicest intersection in North Topeka, but I want my stuff to be quality. My father was a carpenter his whole life. All of his stuff was quality. We don't make a ton of money when you put that much effort into building something nice, but we are proud of it. And when I put my name on something, it's going to be a quality product. So, in closing, I understand all of your issues with the development. I'd be happy to stand for questions either now or afterwards, and be able to talk to any one of you. And like I said, I would be willing to sell the land if somebody were to offer it. I don't want to cause trouble. I want my neighbors to enjoy me, and I hope we can find some common ground to have a good community. Thank you.
Meetings are supposed to be questions from the public
To
us and not to other people. I want to make sure we keep that.
Yes.
I thought the developer presentation was already done.
He was clarifying, in my mind, he's clarifying.
Was done before we got to speak. I don't mind him speaking, but give us a chance.
Thank you. Well, you speak to the chair, then we can.
Please make all of your comments to the chair. This isn't time for a colloquy. This is time for public comment. So if
Hold
you
on a
are
second.
finished, is there anyone else who would like to speak before we close the public hearing? Okay, go ahead.
Well, just out of curiosity, I'd like to know what he would be willing to sell the property for.
Okay, and that is beyond the purview of the public hearing.
Well, no, I would.
That's something that could happen after
Yes.
the meeting tonight.
Okay, and then the other thing is, he talks about shared responsibility for sidewalks and all the other stuff. Why would we be in equity asked to share responsibility for something that only improves his development?
I don't recall him saying that.
You just said it. He wants
Sir, just to clarify, he was talking about Rochester Road, not his
Okay,
personal
well,
development.
No, I'm talking about Rochester Road, the sidewalks and all of that.
If that were developed, that would be all of us up north with that,
All of
including
us.
me. If Rochester Road was developed, that's not just your neighborhood, that'd be,
Well, I'm talking about
All
the
of it.
sidewalks that go along his property.
right, those would be that's his, it's not part of, yeah.
All right.
That'd be, he's responsible for his own sidewalks.
Okay, well, that part wasn't clear. Okay, you got a question? Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay? Come to the microphone, please.
I'm Marilyn Downs again. I think what has most of us concerned is seeing how they're building across from the church over on Menninger on the other side of Topeka. It is so crowded, and it's for families, and it just kind of gives us all the weebie-jibbies, I think, and I don't know how that happened, but it just doesn't look good for big families to be in there and that being so crowded. And I think that's what's got a lot of us concerned. I know it turned me off. That was the original thing with me was, oh Lord, there'll be 2 stories down there. And, we didn't want that. And they don't even look like they're insulated well. But anyway, that's personal, but I think that's what started a lot of and how they got over there, I have no idea, but they're there. And there's going to be a lot of people in there. And there's no place for families. There's no place for kids to play. Thank you.
Okay. All right. I think we'll go ahead and, is there anyone else that hasn't spoken tonight that is wishing to speak on the topic? And if not, we'll go ahead and close the public comment portion of the meeting. Next is discussion by commissioners. Does anyone have any questions, comments for Mr. Mager?
I did initially have some concerns about the potential for flooding. I'm glad that we had that back and forth between the individual who's closer to the creek, but do we know the state of the dike or levee and age? And my understanding is that's under purview of the drainage district up there. Just want to clarify those things.
I don't have an answer to the state of it or anything along those regards. Yes, it is the North Topeka Drainage District. The other thing I can tell you as far as information, so the 100-year floodplain map you are seeing, or the floodplain map you're seeing here, this is from 2011. That was the most recent update on that floodplain map. So that is information you're seeing associated with this.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
And this is for staff. In the event of a flood, who would be responsible for the property and any damage done? It would be the property owner. It would be the property
Yeah,
owner. That's what I was getting at.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Kelp.
Yeah, Bryson or anybody on staff, question I usually ask, based upon what you heard at the hearing tonight, have you heard anything that would make you qualify or change your recommendation or any of the conditions that are set out in the staff report?
I think the one that's been, I would consider was a pedestrian and bike access. It seems like there is some concern with how the development will interact with the existing neighborhood, so that is one that I would consider removing from the conditions in the staff report.
Well, maybe I'm not recalling it correctly, but it was conjecture, was it not, in the staff report? It's speculating that there might be some pedestrian and cycling access.
There is a recommendation, under the staff recommendation, to make an additional note to allow for a pathway for pedestrians. So that was part of their recommendation to us to make that additional change to the conditions.
Okay, so Bryson, thank you. Bryson, you're suggesting removing that condition?
Mr. Hall?
There, mic's on. The reason that recommendation is in there is really for two reasons. When residential developments happen, over time they connect. If you can imagine little subdivisions that don't connect to one another, there's no pedestrian access. Pedestrian access is weak. There's a little connectivity. If there's not access between local streets, it tends to overload the arterials like Rochester. So it's really a design principle that when individual subdivisions or developments develop, that they have some connectivity. And that's the reason for the pedestrian connection recommendation. Another recommendation is, or another reason for that is it's in the comprehensive plan. One of the principles in the comprehensive plan is complete streets and pedestrian connectivity between and within subdivisions is encouraged and should be provided. So there's a policy basis for it, but it's not a regulatory basis. It's not a requirement in the subdivision code or in the zoning code. So you have the option of not making that a requirement. It's a recommendation, and the way it would work is this development does not connect to Sproaton. This development ends short of Sproaton. it would connect potentially when the land to the east is developed, which the developer owns. And so when they develop that, they could have a connection that links to the south end of Sproaton. But again, there's a policy reason for it, but there's not a regulatory requirement for it.
And I'm not proposing to remove that condition. I just want to know if the staff would stuck with it. And and the answer is yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff or?
Is there any concern about traffic? I've heard lots of different things about traffic tonight, and mostly around that it's already an existing problem in that area. Is that true?
I would say that's correct. So I live north of here. I drive through here all the time. I've spent time in the neighborhood in high school. A certain young lady was there on Sproaton Lane.
You don't have to say
But so I'm there all the time. You know, Rochester has gotten really busy, and I think the worst. I have a sister that lives on Miniga Road, just to the west of here. So I've gone through there also. Those intersections are awful, and I would love for us to see the city. I'd like to see a turn lane and just two lanes of the turn lane. I think that'd be a lot better, and those intersections fixed. I think part of the problem is that those intersections are on the city-county line, and so it's kind of, I don't know if it's real high on the list of things, but this doesn't seem like that. I mean, you have some more cars turning on and off, but it still doesn't change it a whole lot.
Right. So this neighborhood is not going to, there's no way this neighborhood could fix that problem.
No, I wouldn't see them fixing the problem, no.
Yeah. Okay.
And Rochester is a busy street. It's under constructed, underbuilt.
Right.
But I drove that street many times, and there was a drop-off in traffic when the Rochester Elementary School closed, and it was a very noticeable decrease. I don't know if it's back to those preschool levels of traffic. I imagine it's changed different times of the day, depending upon who's going where, but the road does need improvement. I don't think there's any question about that. But to ask the question, you know, you've got zoned land there right now, which mentioned a number of times, that it could be built out. Would we find a single-family development of 10 houses, which is going to create more demand on Rochester Road also? Would be objecting to that development? I mean, at some point if we do that, then at some point it becomes a question of what value is that property? You know, how much are the property rights constricted by the lack of public infrastructure?
Any other questions or comments?
Well, I will go ahead, and I will note that at the last meeting, I commented that there was an open field not directly behind my house, but close to my house that I enjoy looking at. And I made a motion to approve a change in zoning that will allow that field to be filled with multiple duplex developments, because I believe I don't have the right to control that owner from doing what he wants to do, although it affects my view from my property. Given that, based on the findings and analysis of the staff report, I move to recommend to the governing body approval of the rezoning from R1 Single Family Dwelling District to PUD Planned Unit Development with M2 Multiple Family Dwelling District Use Group with additional development requirements and restrictions for multiple family residential development not to exceed 30 dwellings, subject to the conditions as recommended in the staff report.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second the motion.
Are any discussions on the motion?
Well, one thing,
Yes,
if
Mr.
you
Culp.
indulge me once again, Mr. Chairman, you know, we talked a lot about the applicant's property rights, and we talk a lot about what the concerns of the neighborhood are. What I think has been missing to some extent, although it's touched on in the staff report, is what's the public interest, what's the community interest. And I think it's appropriate for us to take into account what we've been talking about here for months and months and months, and that is the need to improve and diversify the housing stock in this community. And this is, it's a small step forward, but it is a movement in that direction. So I think that community interest, that public interest is, it's an important part of my consideration when it comes time to vote.
Thank you. Any other discussion or questions, comments? All right. Chris, would you take the roll?
Mr. Dean?
Aye.
Mr. Freed?
Aye.
Ms. Herron?
Aye.
Mr. Kaut?
Aye.
Mr. Nager?
Aye.
Ms. Pearson?
Aye.
Mr. Tavavin?
Aye.
And Mr. Werner?
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Okay, that's it for the action items tonight. Next is communications to the commission.
Commissioners, I don't believe I have any communications. I probably would extend an offer to, we have a national planning conference that's going to be in person and virtual. If there's some commissioners that would like to attend the virtual, go ahead and let us know. It's at the end of April.
Dan, could you send out the information to the commissioners?
Definitely.
And then we can give you a...
All right. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you.